provide consulting network services for people in the private sector, people in the public sector, concerning advanced communications, and particularly in the area of fiber to the home. I prepare a lot of comments this morning, and since you're running late, I'll send them to you in a letter and just quickly summarize what I'm here for so that I can shorten my comments, if you will. The first thing that I would like to say is that the reason that I was asked by many to come here and make comment today is that there's a concern for a certain amount of prejudice that seems to be coming from your committee. And it is not so much that that's a perception of prejudice has any reality to it, but I want you to know that we'd like to share that perception with you, just for your benefit and just so that you know what's happening out in the rest of the world. So people have come to me and they've encouraged me to talk to you about particularly the kind of comments and the kind of data that came forward, particularly from Connected Nations. And particularly as it concerns Connected Nations, the data that and the conclusions that were drawn for it were a few of them, and I'd just like to read you some of their statements, right? They say 92% of Minnesota households have access to broadband. They say the average download speed statewide is higher than any we've seen in any other state, approximately 6.5 megabits. The sample size is comprised of approximately 200,000 tests performed since November of 2008. Minnesota has the fortunate, this is their language, has the fortunate of having, I'm not sure about their English, several broadband providers that far exceed the national average in terms of download speeds, and therefore within the last week we have relocated a testing server to Chicago and added the ability to measure symmetrical 100 megabit service from there. If those are the kinds of data that you are relying on, we would like to put an astounding, be careful, into that kind of, into the language that you have. Connected Nations has, a reputation nationwide that's supported by newspaper articles, people in the blog sphere, general people in the industry, so on and so forth, that that doesn't necessarily serve them well. In fact, the states that they've been in, both Kentucky and in North Carolina recently, have filed complaints with the Federal Communications Commission and so forth and so on, concerning both their work and the information. That's all available to you, and there's mountains of information on that as well as other things. But I thought maybe what we could do is approach these particular conclusions in a little different way and just take a look at them, right? Because it sounds like we're great, and we don't believe that that's true. The first thing I'd like to say, starting from the last one, it was kind of them to put that server in place, but after all, I don't know anybody in the state right now who's getting 100 megabit symmetrical service anywhere. So while it may be nice of them to do that, I'm not so sure that that's beneficial, and it indicates that something is going on here that really isn't. The piece that they say about our exceeding national broadband averages, I think is somewhat interesting, and I just want to quote this thing from the Communication Workers of America, who do similar studies, and they say the medium download speed for the nation was 2.3 megabits per second. In Japan, the medium download speed is 63 megabits, or 30 times faster than the US. The US also trails South Korea at 49 megabits, Finland at 21, France at 17, Canada at 7.6, and the medium upload speed on the speedmatters.org test was just 435 kilobits per second. Now, I understand that you are the ultra broadband task force, and so I'm hoping that you won't get too excited about exceeding 2.3 megabits per second, at least not in this day and age. So if that's the measure of Connected Nations, right, I think we might want to step back from that just, a bit, okay? As to their claim about these 200,000 tests and 6.5 megabit numbers, I'd like to just point to Connected Nations' own data. The 200,000 tests come from UKIA type performances, and everybody else uses that same speed test. And many people have done speed tests around the country, like communication workers that I mentioned before, the Department of Agriculture, and so on and so on. We could mention all of those people. When they do those tests, their experience is that they get about 2,000 people, checking into the tests. So it was reasonable for us to ask Connected Nations where they got 200,000 tests. And unfortunately, when we asked them, they would not answer that question. We pressed them for the source addresses of those people so we could see, are these coming from where in the state? Okay? And they would not offer that. Now, interestingly enough, BUCA tests are public. They normally reveal this information on their website. They've given this information to many other people. So I'm surprised that Connected Nations feels in this particular case that they have to somehow protect this 200,000 samples. And it doesn't particularly serve us too well, especially when the experience of other people taking these tests is in the area of 2,000. So that's just a number way out of range. But if you looked at it in a different way, Connected Nation also notes that there are 6 of the 7 metropolitan counties that even have speeds beyond 6 megabits. Only 6. And they suggest that there are 3 out-of-state counties that have service beyond 6 megabits per second. So where they're getting 6.5 megabits per second out of that particular population that only has that kind of a population or possibility for that test is a little bit of a stretch, right? I mean, we'd like to think this is a statewide test. We'd like to think that this is actually something more than just the urban core. And even if we're the urban core, I have to tell you that it's probably not a very good. I live in St. Paul. I can't get 6.5 megabits from my provider. So even if it's urban core, we can't quite make that work. So these numbers just don't make any sense. And I just want to share with you that there is a good deal of concern about your accepting those numbers, about your using them in any particular way, about the fact that they're not verifiable from Connected Nations or anybody else. And that's really the piece I came here to talk about. I think there's a lot of other things that you can say, but one of the things that I'd just like to share with you at the end is that by the time that you get done with your report this November, just this November, the FiOS system out east will actually connect more people than we have in the state of Minnesota. Not pass by. They'll actually connect more people with fiber optics than we have here in the state of Minnesota. AT&T's UVerse environment will do something in the same. And in this state, we're holding on with competitors who are clearly in financial problems and having their own investment issues and so forth and so on. One of the things I'd like to ask you to think about, I was involved in the University of Minnesota's building of, building of the internet back in the late 80s and early 90s. And, at that time, that was really kind of a nice thing. But when I go out in rural America, they have dial-up, they don't have services and so forth and so on. And I thought you might want to think about what it might be like to wait 10 or 15 years for the internet to show up. That is really kind of how we're faced with this speed problem. So that's all I came here to say. Okay? Thank you very much for your time. I'll send you the comments.
Thank you for your comments, and we'll enter the full set into that note.
Thank you.